Well, Betty, you're perfectly safe. You're among friends. And while I refer to you as Betty, and I think most of your friends will, and your family will recognize you as Betty, you also have another name or a more formal name. So I'm going to ask you to introduce yourself to everyone watching and give us your full name.
I'm Elizabeth Martha DeLong.
And you're Elizabeth, the name Elizabeth is no doubt a family name.
Yes.
Whose name was that?
Well, it's my parents turned the name around. My great-grandmother was Martha Elizabeth, and they named me Elizabeth Martha.
Ah, your great-grandmother on your mother's
side? On my father's side.
On your father's side. And your maiden name?
Behrens.
Behrens. Mm-hmm. Did you have any nicknames growing up or coming along?
Just Betty, because my dad didn't want me to get Lizzie or something else, and I'm the only one of the children that had, a name that wasn't my legal name.
That wasn't your name. Okay. Now, tell us a little bit about your present family situation. We were talking off camera about that, but you are still a resident of Brentwood.
Yes.
And you live in Brentwood with?
With my daughter Lois, my youngest child.
Mm-hmm. And the youngest of three.
The youngest of three.
And tell us about your other children.
I had a son, Paul, who lived in Oklahoma, who passed away several years ago. I have a daughter, Ruth, who lives in East Islip, and then Lois, who lives with me.
Okay. And Ruth, who lives in East Islip, is doing what these days?
She's a dietitian, but also works sometimes in a doctor's office.
I see. And tell us what your son did before he was tragically taken from us.
My son was a Presbyterian minister who looked forward to perhaps teaching on a college level and was working on his doctorate when he passed away.
At a young age?
Yes, in his 40s.
In his 40s. And you mentioned that was out in Oklahoma?
Yes, his family still lives in Oklahoma.
Yeah. So you... Again, you also lost your husband a number of years
Yes, my husband passed away in 1977 at the age of 52.
So you've had some rough times. How did you meet your husband?
Shortly after he came out of the service, he started to attend our church. And for some reason, he picked up a friendship with my dad and was constantly coming to the house. And I came home from college and we met.
Isn't that wonderful? Where did this take place, this meeting?
In Brooklyn, New York.
What part of Brooklyn?
The Bushwick section.
Okay. Uh-huh. So what could be more ideal? You met him through the family and through family.
Right.
What was he like when you met him?
Well, like a lot of the returning soldiers, he had problems to some extent adjusting. But he worked in a radio factory, making radios, because even in the service, he did that communications work. But
do you remember the name of the company that he worked?
One of them was Fader Radio. I forget the other one. Okay. But shortly after we met, he felt called to the ministry. And I had been going...
So that's the effect that you had on him.
Yes. I just had graduated from Philadelphia College of the Bible because I had been interested in doing missionary work. So it was a natural fit when we met.
Yes.
And eventually he had a church in Brooklyn for many years.
What a wonderful story. Now this is, of course, for those who may not be aware, we're not talking about Vietnam here or the Korean War.
No, it was the Second World War.
We're talking about the Second World War when he came back. And again, many people may not recognize the fact that even returning vets from World War II had adjustments to make after the war because of what they had seen.
Because of what they went through.
What they went through.
Yeah.
Do you have any idea what service he saw or what part of the
he was in Germany. He was with Patton's army.
He was. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Well, then he certainly did see some action.
Right.
Let's talk a little bit more about your children. And for the sake of this discussion, let's talk about all three of your children.
Okay.
How their personalities or their qualities or talents or interests express themselves.
Well, Well, all three are different, as anybody knows. No two children are alike. Paul was a great tease to his two sisters, and some of the things the girls tell me now, if I had known then, I would have been quite angry at. Little tricks he would play on them, but mostly they got along very well. Very tight-knit family, cared for one another, and helped one another when they could. But as I said, they were each different, each had certain likes, and some things that were the same. When they came to the high school, all three participated with Mr. Burns in the drama groups.
I see.
So that was alike.
Maury Burns?
Yes, and both Paul and Lois remained in the Brentwood band right through. Ruth was in the West Junior High band, but didn't follow it when she came to the high school.
So they all had a kind of a musical.
Oh, yes.
Too.
Musical and the drama background, yeah.
And does that still hold true for both your daughters today?
Yes, somewhat, yeah. Lois is still active while her job, she's editor of a couple of magazines in the city for the American Institute of Chemical Engineers, but she still has that love for drama. She has a drama group that meets at the Presbyterian Church here in Brentwood, and each year they perform a musical that she helps them write. And my daughter Ruth helps her with that to some extent.
So there's another family involvement.
Oh, yes.
It's become traditional. That's wonderful. What about the grandchildren now? How many are there and who are they? Let's hear their names.
I have 7 grandchildren. My son Paul had 3 children out in Oklahoma. He had 2 girls, Candace and Caitlin, and a boy, Christopher. And my daughter Ruth had a daughter, Amy, who's now 26 years old, and she has 3 stepchildren, which consider me their grandmother, even though they're not blood relative. But that's Melissa.
But you are grandma nonetheless.
Oh, yes. And they asked for it. I didn't ask them. They said, can I call you grandma?
Wonderful.
I wanted.
What
and Melissa is a senior at East Islip High School. And then the second granddaughter in that group is Christina, and she's a sophomore. And then the youngest one of that family is in junior high school. That's Stephanie.
Okay. Now that takes care of all of them, does it?
Right.
Okay.
Right.
And do you notice at this point any of the interests or the qualities of the parents shining through the youngsters' lives at this point? Is there a music or drama flair or
oh, yes. The 3 grandchildren who live in East Islip are in the program that my daughter has at the church and perform in the musical.
But I'll bet the same thing is true, Betty, that the grandchildren are as different as the
yes.
children are.
Oh, they each have their own. Yeah. They each have their own personality and the things they like to do.
Now, how much family contact is there with your son's children out in Oklahoma?
Not a great deal because of the distance.
Yeah.
And in the beginning, I used to go out quite a bit, but my health won't let me go out too much anymore.
Yeah, travel is hard work.
Right. We speak on the phone, and we are close that way.
Good. Now, when were you born?
When was I born? Yes. October 4th, 1923.
And where would that have been in
Brooklyn?
In the Bushwick section
of
Brooklyn?
St. John's Hospital.
I was just about to ask. Yes. Okay. All right. And what, Betty, might be some of your earliest childhood memories?
Well, that's going back a while, but the difference from today, the old coal stove that we had in the kitchen that my mother sometimes cooked on, because she didn't have television. We had radio, but no television. No central heating in most of the houses. I remember that, but I remember having a very happy childhood. I was the oldest of 7 children who were very close. And my mom used to say they might fight with one another, but don't you pick a fight with one or you fight with all 7. So it was a very close-knit family as I grew up.
And this would have made you a youngster during the 20s and early 30s.
Oh, yes.
When we were in the height of the Depression in this country.
Yes. Oh, I remember that. My dad had a job, so I thought we were rich. when I look back now, I think he didn't even make $20 a week. And I often wonder how Mom stretched it. But because so many people were out of work and he was working, I felt like we were kind of elite.
Yes. Oh, sure. And quite honestly, in those days, $20.
Oh, went much further than our money today.
Yes. Yes.
Much further.
They do a lot more. What was your mother's maiden name?
My mother's name was Mann, M-A-N-N.
Uh-huh.
And that's very interesting. I come from a very early American family. The Manns came to the New World in 1620.
Is that a fact?
And we have been in this country ever since.
Now, 1620 would have put you around Mayflower time.
Yes. We were told there's a connection, but I've never been able to get it down where I can establish for sure that.
So you've had an interest in genealogy,
yes.
family history.
Yes, my cousins and I follow it even today. We're still searching for our background.
That's wonderful.
Oh, it's very interesting.
Have you utilized the internet since you've had a chance?
I haven't, but some of my cousins have. Some of my cousins have.
So the Mann family goes way back
Yes.
to the origins of this presently divided nation.
Right. Right.
Where we haven't decided who our next president is going to be.
And while I am very proud of it, I'm also aware that I still pay the same price on the subway as everybody else.
What about your dad's family background? And do you know anything about his history, also
yes,
his family
to some
history?
extent. I think I'm the 5th generation here on his side from Germany. And again, a very big family, but a loving family. And I have lots of cousins and aunts and uncles and everything, which always made life very interesting.
Do you have any idea what part of Germany he or his family?
I think over near the Black Forest.
I see.
I have his birth certificate, but I can't remember the exact town.
What were the occupations or the means of earning a living that either your mother's family or your father's family had to have contributed, I should say, to the family history?
Right.
What did they do?
My mother's father, who is, in the Mann family line, worked for the Fairbanks Scale Company. And I think he worked in their mailroom. My father's people, for a while, had a farm. And my grandfather, my father's father, was the one who painted the eagles that were on the Brooklyn Eagle newspaper on their building. He was an artist, and he painted those.
And the Brooklyn Eagle is no longer in existence, unfortunately. It's a great, very historic newspaper.
And we didn't know it, but they had auctioned those eagles off.
Is that right?
And we found out later, but probably couldn't have afforded them anyway. But, it's nice to think about that he did do it. They always told a funny story about him. He did sign painting as well as, artistic work. And one time he did the window of a Chinese laundry, and he got so confused that he signed his name backwards. And the family, of course, always made a joke out of that.
That's a great story. Now, what about childhood memories of let's talk about your mom first. As when you were a little girl, some of the memories you have of your mother.
Well, I have a lot of memories. She was a very good mother. She loved to walk, and we kids sometimes were taking on walks till we felt like our legs were going to fall off, but it was really good for us. She was always interested in everything we did.
What did she like doing, Betty? What was
My mother was the old-fashioned homemaker. I don't think she really ever did too much outside work, because her mother passed away when she was 14, and she became a mother to her brothers and sisters. And so mostly it was raising them.
Yes.
And then starting to raise
she
us.
became a nurturer for the rest of her life.
Exactly, exactly. But she was a mom that was always there for us.
Yes.
Even after we were all married, if we needed help, We needed a babysitter when the kids were sick.
I see.
All you had to do was call Mama.
I'd say you had a great role model.
Oh, I did. I
Yeah.
did.
What about your dad?
My dad
Early
worked.
memories of your dad.
He was an exceptional father. I think because he had been left an orphan and didn't have that nurturing, there wasn't anything he couldn't do for us.
That's interesting. Both your mother and your father had lost their parents.
Lost their
early.
parents. My father lost both his mother and father within 6 months.
Yeah.
And so while he was brought up by family members, it wasn't having a parent. And he loved being a father. He loved being a grandfather. And when there was a baby around, there would just be a smile on his face that you couldn't picture. Yeah. And it's hard to express the love he had and the care for us.
And this from a man who did not have the role modeling from biological parents, but chose instead to pick his role models among other people and then internalize those values.
Right. And instilled in us the love for family, because we did everything together. He was a great baseball fan.
Was he?
And the way he would get us to...
Who did he follow? What team?
The Dodgers, of course, coming from Brooklyn. And Saturday he'd say, well, if everybody helps Mom get the chores done, I'm going to the ball game. You can come with me. So chores got done in a hurry. And again, he had limited money. I can remember we would take the trolley to go down to Ebbetsville. And coming home, I didn't realize it at the time. So he'd say, oh, let's walk. The trolleys are so crowded. And normally we'd walk all the way home. And then as I got older, I realized he was using his lunch money even to take us kids. And so walking home, he knew we really had to. But he made it fun. All the way we discussed the ball game.
How wonderful.
It really made a family of us.
Yeah. I guess we could use some of those parenting skills today, couldn't we?
Right. It bothers me when I hear people say, well, I'm the way I am because of the way I grew up. My dad had every right to be angry with the world. But he wasn't. He made the best of life and decided his family was going to have what he didn't have.
Mm-hmm. Now, you mentioned in your own family, you were among the youngest in the birth order, did you say?
No, I'm the oldest. I'm the oldest of 7 children.
The oldest of 7. So you became the role model for the ones that followed then.
Yes, and I became like a second mother to all the younger brothers and sisters. The youngest were born when I was 16 years old, a set of twins, and I just had to be my mother's helper.
Yeah.
But as I say, it was almost like a second mother. Those boys still look to me as, you know.
Betty, do you have all of your siblings, all of your brothers and sisters with you?
No, just about 2 years ago, the youngest brother and the youngest sister passed away. But there are 5 of us together, and we're still very close. While we don't travel as much to see one another, there's lots of phone calls and lots of cards.
What do the other people do? Are they all retired like you are, or
well, the youngest is semi-retired. He was a teacher at Smithtown, and then went upstate to Schuylerville, where he was principal up there. And while he retired from that, he's still not retired. He's always helping some school district out. And I have another brother who was a security guard at Syosset Hospital, who's now retired. And my brother William worked for an aircraft plant in Massachusetts, because he went back to where the family originally came from.
Oh, is that where your family came from originally?
Yeah. They're from like the Douglas and Blackstone area and down into Providence.
I see. Okay.
We have a reunion once a year, and every 5th year we go back to Massachusetts for it, where we go to the cemeteries where the different Revolutionary War soldiers in our family are buried. It's since we traced our history, we've really we've worked at it, and we've had several reunions. We've even had the American Legion come and hold a ceremony at the grave sites when we put wreaths on the
yeah.
graves and things. So we're very into that.
Mm. Were there other adults when you were a little girl? Were there other adults besides your immediate family that had a strong influence on your growing up, or your likes and dislikes and later
Oh,
years?
I'm sure there were some of my teachers.
Okay.
I can remember, feeling strongly about them. And we've always been very active in church work.
Mm-hmm.
And so I always had the role models of Sunday school teachers, of pastors, and I'm sure they had an influence on my
Yes.
life.
Okay. Talking about early influences, at a certain point in all our lives, our friends exert a powerful influence on us. Thinking about your high school or your grammar school or high school friends, were some of those friendships lifelong friendships, or did you lose touch with everybody?
I lost touch with them.
Did you?
Very close while we were in school. I went to Washington Irving High School in the city, and there was a group of us. Back then it was like a League of Nations.
Yes.
One Jewish girl got on in East New York, and I got on the subway. We'd always planned to be in the same car, and I'd get on when it got into the Bushwick section. As we went down, two Negro sisters got on with us, and one American Indian girl, and then an Italian girl got on the last stop, and we were a very close-knit bunch going back and forth to school.
Now,
But sorry to say, after
Yeah.
school, we lost
you lose
contact.
touch with one another. Well, of course, it was a different world then too, and socially we were organized in a very different way, so it might have been more difficult.
Right, and the
also.
Second World War started just as I was a senior, and,
Yes.
everything changed.
Washington Irving is down around 15th Street, or
Right, and 3rd Avenue.
3rd Avenue. I was going to ask you a question that you've already answered. We were talking about where you grew up, and you said your early years were in Bushwick.
Right.
Were you, as the oldest, were you assigned in some way the job of distributing chores among your brothers and sisters?
No, Mom did that.
Mom did that.
Mom did that.
All right.
And
Did you have a job that you were supposed to take care of, or was it a shared?
No, she assigned us each, like one daughter took the kitchen, and one of us had to clean the bathrooms, and
But everybody was responsible.
everybody. The boys had to bring the coal in for the coal stove and take the garbage out, and my brothers even had to do dishes.
You see, again, and I'm emphasizing this today, there's a big thrust for character education in the schools, even as we enter this new millennium. Part of that built character, didn't it?
Oh, yes. Oh, yes.
Trusting kids to do what they were supposed to do.
Right.
Responsibility.
In fact, we often laugh, even now as we're older. My brother had to take his turn 1 week washing the dishes, 1 week drying. And that finally stopped when I think he put some of his friends up to call in, "Pete, are you done with the dishes yet?" And my mother was a little embarrassed, so she decided he had to do more manly chores.
Do you remember your first paying job, Betty?
Yes, I worked for Singer Sewing Machine Company at Prince and Broadway in their parts department, where their mechanics who went out to repair the machines in the factory came in the mornings to get their parts to take out to repair.
Ah, okay. Was that a full-time job or a part-time
yes.
job? That was a full-time job.
Yeah,
that was after high school.
That was after high school. I didn't work at all up until then.
Mm-hmm.
And I worked there for 18 months before I left to go to college.
Okay.
And then I came back for 1 summer, and they used me as a replacement when people went on vacation.
What kind of a kid were you? What were you interested in as a kid? What was some of the things that you might do after school besides going home and helping Mom, which obviously you did?
Oh, I loved roller skating. And there was one place around the corner from us that had very smooth sidewalk. And to us, that was like a skating rink, and we'd all meet up there. And of course, we did the usual things, playing Ringalivio and hide and seek. And
the street games that were so popular back then too. And you mentioned roller skates. Roller skates then ball bearing roller skates, you wanted to
Steel wheel.
have a smooth street, and the
Right.
asphalt streets were wonderful, but they were also dangerous. So if you could find a good sidewalk.
Yes, we used to, it was near a garage that wasn't used. Well, the side there was no entrance out of, so we didn't have to worry about cars.
Yeah.
And we were still in calling distance of our mother if she needed us. But it was a great place to skate.
Yeah. And the city was a great place to grow up, too.
Oh, yes. Oh, yes. You didn't have to worry about a car. Take a trolley car or a bus or the subway, go wherever you wanted.
And it was safe.
It was safe. It was safe.
Because there were a dozen people on your block that were looking out for you. And would call-
Exactly. And even the policeman on the beat, we knew. And he knew each of our mothers. So you knew if you were caught doing anything, Mama heard about it from him. He knew us all by name, and he knew whose mother was who. And so you watched.
Does it sometimes strike you that you have lived in different time zones? Because
Oh,
the world that you describe here to me now is one that has to be very fondly remembered as a time of incredible innocence and
Exactly.
simplicity.
Exactly. And it was a happy time.
Yeah.
As you mentioned, I grew up in the Depression, but we made do with what we had. We didn't gimme. Our parents couldn't give it to us. I was just saying to somebody recently, if I didn't have a doll carriage, I took a shoebox, tied a string on it, and pulled it and had my doll in it. We used our imagination. Kids today don't use their imagination.
You could make your own toys.
You did.
Yeah.
The old scooters. Now you see the kids with these new steel ones. Our brothers took a board, took a skate apart, put a peach box on, peach crate on it, and they had a scooter.
Yes. Yes. And the rubber band guns to shoot.
Exactly, with all the pieces of linoleum or cardboard.
Betty, have you changed your style, or have you always been a morning person or a night person?
I've always been a morning person,
Mm-hmm.
but I still stay up late. I'm a night owl, so I don't need much sleep.
Did you have a favorite toy when you were a little girl? Is there a favorite doll or a favorite toy that you had that was either given to you or that you may have made, for all I know?
I always had dolls
Mm-hmm.
and loved to play with them, but I can't remember one
Okay.
favorite one.
But you can tell me what your favorite season is.
My favorite season, I guess the summer.
And that would be because?
You could stay out. There was no school the next day, and it was safe in those days to go out and play even after supper. Your parents didn't have to worry about you. So I think growing up, summer was the one.
They say that aromas are very often a trigger for memories because I guess of the way our brain processes that kind of information. Have you ever had the experience of walking or being in a certain environment and getting a whiff of something and it taking you back to when you were a child?
Sure.
What aromas do that for you?
For one thing, ice cream. I know maybe it doesn't have a very strong one, but we always got an ice cream at night during my favorite season, the summer. But even the cooking smells, because living in the city, I was in an apartment house, 6 families, and at supper time, you knew what everybody was eating. And if you smell it today, it makes you think of some neighbor.
Isn't that wonderful? Yes. Yeah. It's funny you mention ice creams. I have an attachment to, for some reason, a vanilla ice cream, aroma vanilla that does that to me as well.
Yeah.
Do you remember your first day of school?
My what?
First day of school?
First day of school? I don't know if I exactly remember the first day, but I remember my young years in grammar school.
Mm-hmm.
Same one that my children started in because we still lived in Brooklyn.
Really?
And in fact, when my son started first grade, the teacher that had been my 6th grade teacher was then principal. And she was a very favorite teacher of mine. But yes, I do remember my first grade.
And they had somebody rang a bell to change the classes? I mean, a real bell, a little hand bell, was it? Or was it?
No, by that time, the public schools in the city, in the younger grades, you didn't change classes. Of course, you went in, you were there the whole day.
Yes.
And the one thing I remember that's different now, you had an hour for lunch and went home, and ate your lunch and came back.
Yeah. Now, you mentioned some of the teachers. Can you think of one teacher or the name of one teacher that you remember from those early years?
Yeah, this one I told you that I had her for 5th and 6th grade.
Okay.
Her name was Miss Frankel, and she was just what you picture a teacher should be.
Yes.
And she was very sweet and nice to us and had ways to encourage us to study.
I guess that goes back to an earlier question about the people who early on in your life can influence you and make a big difference.
Sure.
Yeah.
All of my teachers did, even though at this age I don't remember all their names.
Yes, sure.
I can picture them in my mind. I can picture the school I went to.
What were your favorite subjects in school? If you had a favorite.
In a way I did. I liked math. Well, we didn't have some of the math the kids do today. I was always good in math. And I've always been a reader, so I guess English was one of the things I liked.
You also mentioned going on to college after Washington Irving when you went to school. Where did you go? Where did you attend college?
I went to the Philadelphia College of the Bible, which was in Philadelphia, because I felt that perhaps there was some mission work I was going to do.
And what happened with that dream?
Well,
you met your husband, and then it went from there.
Yes, but I mean, we took a church, and I was active with him in his church.
I see.
So my background was,
perfectly suited for that.
Right. Because he, in fact, went to the same school, but then went on further to take other courses than I did.
Now, what year did you first find yourself in Brentwood? When did you first?
We moved out here in 1960. At that time, my husband had left his he was a pastor, and left his full-time church to do, to help out in churches where they really couldn't afford a pastor and needed someone to speak. And he went to work for an electrical company in the city. He had a background in some drafting, and he did that for one of the big firms in the city. And we decided it was time to get the children out more in the country, and started looking.
And in 1960, even though it was after World War II, but the boom was in full swing here,
right?
But it was still country, wasn't it?
Oh, yes. Oh, it was very country-like.
Yeah. And
we started first looking in Nassau County, and a little bit too high first, and gradually got out. And in the Brentwood Bayshore area, we found a house that we could afford. And I'm still in that.
And you're still in that house. And that explains why you came to Brentwood as well.
Right.
Okay.
Right.
What prompted you to move out here? At some point, you went to work in the Brentwood school district.
Right. When we were in the city, I was active in the PTA, and the PTA there put a library in the school. There wasn't one in our elementary school. And I used to help out 1 or 2 days a week, help the teachers when the children came in to get books. And I happened to mention that to one of the teachers at Southwest. And she said, well, Betty, if you ever want to go back to work, why don't you think about going to the Brentwood schools and seeing if they have openings in the library? And I did. And at the time, there weren't any, but they said, go take the civil service test. And then they said, but if you want to do some work, we could substitute in the kitchens. And I said, okay, I need something to do with my time. So I started at West Junior, and then I got several calls after I took the test, but I didn't want to go too far away. And finally, I got one from Brentwood saying they needed someone in the high school library.
And this is in the Ross building?
That was in the Ross building. I came in and I was interviewed by, going to have to help me, who was the district business manager at that time?
The business manager at that time, Jerry. You see, I may not know the name either, but whoever it was at that point.
Yeah,
Jerry Smith?
No, it
wasn't
wasn't Jerry Smith. Anyway, it may come to me later. He interviewed me and then called Mr. Purcell and said, are you still there? I'd like to send this young lady over.
Okay.
And I was interviewed by Joe and started the following Monday
So Joe Purcell interviewed you as part of the process of
as part of it. So he was the one that actually hired.
That
me
must,
then.
knowing Joe Purcell, that must have been a very long interview because Joe is not at a loss for words.
No, but it made me feel very comfortable,
Good,
so that I was, happy to take the job.
And again, once you took the job now, what were some of your first impressions of the Brentwood School District?
I loved it. It was a happy place to come. The kids were there to learn, first of all, but second of all, they got along well. We did a lot of fun things. I was just mentioning to somebody today while I was waiting how nice it was at the holidays. Kids used to decorate the classroom door, and they'd give awards out for the best floor, and nobody disturbed those things. They were never destroyed. And then at Valentine's Day, they would sell roses and see which girl in the school got the most roses. There were fun things as well as work.
Yeah. Which reminds me, there was a question I wanted to ask before it slipped away, but you brought me back to it. In your own family, is there a favorite holiday, or is there a holiday that's important to that brings the family
Well,
together?
in a way, all holidays were important. But as we grew older and started to get married, my mother knew there was going to be problems getting 7 of us all together. And she suggested that New Year's Day should be our holiday. She said a lot of people celebrate New Year's Eve. You'll never probably have a problem with an in-law. And that way you can go to any of their other celebrations, but New Year's Day should be ours.
What a wise woman she was.
That became very, we looked forward to it each year. We knew that no matter what other holidays we were together, New Year's Day was ours.
Okay.
And I still think about it. Well, we don't do it anymore. I still think about the fun that was.
Yeah. And now to slip back into the other discussion we're having about the students and the staff at Brentwood in your early days here in the 60s celebrating holidays. And
right.
There was always a high energy level around those times of year.
Oh, yeah.
Now, have you worked, you said initially you began working in the kitchen to help out.
Right.
But once you were interviewed for the position in the library, then you stayed with the library for the rest of the time in Brentwood.
And I stayed in the Ross building until 1969, September, when the school went back on part-time schooling. And they sent me over to work the afternoon session in the Sunderland building with Bill Graney. And I was there for the rest of the time.
And you were there beyond the point when he retired?
Bill died.
Did he die before he retired?
Oh, yes.
See, I was under the impression that he retired and then he died. No, he died before he retired.
The last year that he was alive, he spent most of his time in the hospital. And I used to go over each day to Smithtown, St. John's he was in, and I would tell him what went on during the day. What did he want me to do? And he passed away in May. And then that was when they were building the new library between the buildings. And they brought Janet Wertzman in as the librarian in Sunderland. And then we combined when the new building was up. So I actually retired from the new library.
You were also involved in a lot of the decisions that were being made then about what to have in the new library. I mean, you watched all this happening. All the controversy about what equipment and what to stock it with.
And putting computer into the library, having to get all the books set up, putting security systems in. I was involved in getting all of that.
And that was the beginning of a new world of library science. Then.
Oh, yes.
We've certainly, again, that question of how far things have come from where we all have memories of them being.
Right.
Within one lifetime. It is amazing, isn't it? Do you have a lot of contact with people that you met in the early years in other words, the organization, the Rob's organization that you were also a part of, do you get a chance to visit with or to be with people who you were together with in the early days? Or?
Not as much as I'd like to. It's more hit and miss.
Yes.
I happen to meet some of the women if we're shopping. Joe Purcell called me a few times on the phone. And for a while, I was coming to the Rob's meetings, but since I had the stroke, I can't drive. So,
so it becomes increasingly difficult.
In fact,
Betty, you're participating this way.
Oh, yes.
See?
Well, the last Rob's meeting I was at, you showed one of the films. It was the one that they interviewed Sally Andrews in.
Yes.
And Sally and I are friends, so I was glad to see that.
Listen, I ask this question of everyone, and I know you'll have an answer for it because of who you are. Your job description indicated what you were supposed to be doing and why the district had hired you to do this, thus, and so. But you also had your own reason for loving the work that you did and for being there. You had your higher purpose, let's say.
Right.
Could you tell us how you defined your work and your purpose for being in the high school, working with kids in the library?
I think because I've always loved to be around young people. Maybe it's the mothering instinct. I always want to mother all of them. But I found that by reaching out to them, many times they would come to me with their problems. But they used to get one stock answer if they complained about moms. I used to say, I'm a mother, and we all come from the same mold. So if your mother tells you something, you have to listen. But I think that's what made the job interesting and made me want to stay here and work.
Yeah. There is an importance to what you said beyond the words, and that is kids, well, all of us, not just young people, have times when you need somebody to talk to.
Right, right.
And it's not always the person that you would think it is. Sometimes it is, sometimes it's your teacher, but not always.
I know.
It's who you make the connection with.
Right. And both Mr. Purcell and Bill Graney used to emphasize, don't get so involved with the kids. But I couldn't help myself.
Now, you you mentioned earlier having to take a test to civil service.
Right.
But your organizational membership or identification changed over the years, too, because you eventually became a full partner with teachers in the NYSET organization.
Right.
And that, I guess, was through, was it CSEA that...
Well, we were with the CSEA, and then the Brentwood Clerical went out and had their own, called the Brentwood Clerical Association. Yes. And I think it was that association that asked the teachers if we couldn't be one group with them.
And were you ever active in that organization? Did you have any part to play in...
I was never an officer, but I was at all the meetings and...
So you participated in the organizational aspect of it.
Right, but never as an officer.
No, okay, all right. I guess while there are a lot of questions I would like to ask, I'm just, let me single this one out and answer it any way you like. But we've all met a number of how I would define lovable characters over the years. Is there anyone who comes to mind when I use the phrase lovable character?
I know what you're getting at, but I don't know if I would term it that. I met a lot of teachers that I'm very fond of, and some that I still hear from, keep in touch with. I don't know if you'd really call them characters.
Okay.
Anyway.
Now, there came a point when you said to yourself, and I know you said this because we've talked about it in the past, I'm not having as much fun as I used to have. And when that happened, I believe that it was around 1989.
Right.
And tell me something about what went into that decision, because you'd been doing this prior to that. You'd been doing this for how many years? How many years had you?
Well, counting the time in the kitchen, I left when I had been at the district 25 years.
25 years, okay.
But I'd say maybe the last 18 months, I began to see it more as work. I found there was more confusion, not quite as organized. And of course, I got along well with the two librarians,
Yes.
the one that replaced Bill Graney and all, but I just didn't feel that it was worth coming
As a
in.
matter of fact, you're absolutely, you have to be correct, because what you're describing was a period of rapid change
Right.
in the system. There was, in fact, there had to be systemically a lot of confusion as roles were being redefined,
Right.
jobs were being
And a whole
established,
new library
and a whole
to
new
walk
system coming into.
Right.
So that you have to be right on the mark when you
Yeah.
say it was confusing and seemed disorganized,
Right.
because in fact it had to be.
Yes, it had to be.
And at that point, the stress level probably, or whatever, you just said,
Yeah.
you know, this is not fun.
I know. And I told Mr. Purcell that I was thinking of retiring, but I don't think he believed me. And then finally I said, I'm putting my papers in. That's it. And I'm not sorry. In a way, I'm sorry. I still could have worked a few more years and enjoyed some of the staff that I enjoyed being with. But I haven't really regretted leaving.
Mm-hmm.
I still try to use my time well doing volunteer work.
What are some of the volunteer things that you do?
For at least 5 years, maybe 6, I was a chaplain at Southside Hospital, and I really enjoyed that. There were certain things I didn't enjoy. They asked me to take the cancer floors and the infectious diseases where all your HIV patients were. And it used to be very sad when I would walk in and find one of the girls or boys who I knew here at Brentwood High, and I knew it was the end for them. And yet again, it gave me a chance to, try to encourage them and pray with them. So there was a good side and a bad side to it, but I really did enjoy my time at Southside.
Betty, what your description makes me even more aware of something that I've heard said and said myself many times in the last year alone, and that is Brentwood here really is an extended family.
Oh, yes. Oh, yes. When I would look at them, it wouldn't be, well, that was just some kid I knew. I knew the time when they were in school, and I remembered things about them. And as I say, I appreciated the opportunity to help them if I could.
Yes.
But it used to be sad.
It was tough on you. Tougher on you, perhaps, than even on them.
Then probably. But I did enjoy at least spending time with them.
Is there, well, I don't want to cut this short, because you were talking about your other volunteer things that you're volunteering
Right. Well,
with.
I volunteer 2 days a week at the Brentwood Presbyterian Church. I am the office manager, for the want of a better word.
Okay.
I run the office. I make sure that the food pantry, if people come in for food, that I can give them food or vouchers. And to some extent, I work a little bit like the assistant to the pastor.
Mm-hmm.
I take communion around to the sick with him. And
well, you're another example of a person who really hasn't retired. You're
no,
still working.
it's funny you said it like that, because the year after I retired, one of the teachers had lost his wife, and we went to the funeral parlor, and one of the teachers came up and said to my daughter, Lois, how is your mother enjoying retirement? She said, my mother doesn't know she's retired.
Yes, good, well said. Do you remember what your beginning salary was here in the district? And of course, this would have been before taxes when you just got.
I don't.
Okay.
I don't even remember what it was when I left.
Okay. Which is interesting, because how many people I've talked to say, that they just got the money, they put it in the bank, it covered covered the expenses, and that's all that was important. They were enjoying what they were doing, and it wasn't about the money.
Of course, it wasn't about the money. It's I enjoyed, as I told you earlier, I love to read. So what better place than working in the library? As soon as the books come in, I could read them.
Was there one thing during the years that you worked in the library that gave you the most pleasure? I mean, you've answered that question in a way, and if that's the answer, we can just move on. But if maybe there's another way that you want to answer
I think it was the connection with to kids. And some of that was because of my own children being in here. If they were involved in the drama, all the kids who were in the play ended up in the library talking to me. It made me really feel like I was part of what was going on here.
Is there anything that you would, in your capacity, is there anything that you would like to have done differently or to have seen accomplished in the time that you were working that you weren't able to see come to fruition?
I'm sure there were. I can't think of one offhand, but I'm sure there were plenty of things left half done that I would have liked to have finished.
You've been out now for about 11 years.
Yeah.
And you've had a chance to look at what there's been in the last 11 years. My goodness, there have been a lot of changes in our own country, let alone in Brentwood. Do you have any concerns, Betty, for what you now see happening to public education or to schools, or maybe either in the district or beyond the district?
I think just in general.
Yeah, in general.
I don't know what the answer is. Maybe some of it is not enough parent participation, but I feel the kids are not as serious about school as they used to be. Now, whether the fault is theirs, whether it's the fault of education, I don't know. But a lot of the kids are just biding their time because they're too young to just quit school.
What I hear you saying is many kids have no idea of just how important this time is to them. And how profoundly important the decisions they're making now are going to be.
Affect their whole life.
For their whole life.
They think, oh, well, I'll get a job, but they don't know what if you can do something you really enjoy, it makes life worthwhile.
And they say something, the last time I read a statistic, 8 out of 10 people in this country don't like the work that they're doing.
Oh, I'm sure of that.
And if there is a way to change that early on and to do something you love, life becomes very different, doesn't it?
Exactly. Talking about that, my youngest daughter, Lois, often says to me, Mom, how many people get to do in their job what they've always wanted to do? She always wanted to be a writer from the time she was in first grade. And here now she gets paid for writing. And if everybody could just realize they have to get their education to do what they want, it would make things a lot different.
It is the path. It's an open door to whatever potential futures you might wish for yourself.
And for what it's worth, I always wanted to be a dietitian. And while I never fulfilled that, my daughter did.
She has fulfilled your fantasy.
Right.
What about the young people today who are going into library science, or the young people today who are going into the field of education? And if you've done a lot of reading and you've enjoyed reading about a diet, how would you say, the field of dietitians? I'm not quite sure how to describe this. Dietetics. We're living in a world where there's a great deal more information available to us than we ever had available to us when we were making those important decisions as to what we put in our body and what we put in our minds.
Oh, exactly.
Is there any advice that you might now, given your experience, that you could offer to somebody just beginning in a career in any of those fields today?
Well, to realize the importance, the difference you can make. We hear a lot of people talking about making a difference in the world. Our careers can make a difference in the world if we really think about it and try to help others with what we're doing. It makes a big difference.
You've reminded me of something that I have used to fight against, the belief that, well, if you could affect just one life, you can be satisfied to know that you've affected one life. I was trying to affect a lot of lives. But I finally came to the conclusion that what you just said now is the answer that I was looking for all along. Yes, if you can affect one life, you can in fact change the whole world.
Exactly, because you affect one and that person affects another, and then it affects another. And that's where the help comes from.
It's been a joy talking with you. It's been a joy listening to your story, because it is reaffirming to know that yet one more person in Brentwood has changed the world in so many ways, as I know your life has. And thank you for giving us the time.
Oh, I was glad to do it. I loved my years at Brentwood.
Thanks, Betty. Thank you.